Army Group South had suffered serious reverses in the battle for the Caucasus, and most damaging of all, the loss of the 6th Army at Stalingrad. As spring moved into summer in 1943, Hitler and his generals were set on a new summer offensive that could ideally reverse the westward momentum, or at the very least, stabilize the front and allow time and space for a firmer defensive line to be established. At this point, a large bulge in the front line around Kursk seemed to offer a realistic and crucially achievable opportunity for the German military, where 2 armored hammer blows from the north and south might pinch off the Soviet salient. Ultimately, however, Hitler dithered, and his army was not as strong as it once was. In addition to losing around 500,000 soldiers at Stalingrad, another 250,000 had surrendered at Tunisia in the spring, and he wanted more of the newly produced Panther tanks from his factories reaching the battlefield before he would commit his forces. On July 2nd, under the command of Luftwaffe 4, 3rd JG-52, transferred north in order to support this major offensive. Dubbed Operation Citadel, they were initially sent to Zaporizhia on the Dnieper River, but later moved to Ugram, north of Kharkiv, much closer to the front lines. They were to support the southern thrust. The offensive began on July 5th, and that day featured the largest amount of aerial combat of any day in the war. On that day alone, the Luftwaffe claimed to have shot down 432 Soviet aircraft. A large number of JG-52's missions were focused on protecting the panzers from the ground attack aircraft, primarily the Sturmovaks. Walter Kurbensky was shot down and injured on the first day, and when he was evacuated, Erich was made temporary commander of the Staffel, a position he held until Kurbensky returned to duty on August 6th. Erich claimed 4 kills on July 5th across at least 4 missions that stretched over 15 hours of combat, from the very early morning to early evening. July 7th was even more intense, as Erich became an ace in a day, shooting down 8 planes, 5 of which were Sturmovaks. On the 8th day, he claimed 4 logs, and on the 9th, he shot down 2 logs and a Sturmovak. In August, the Gruppe fell back on Kharkiv, but the kill rate increased even further. Erich started August with 42 kills, but by the end of the month, he had reached 90, including 2 ace-in-a-day achievements on August 5th and 7th. At one point during the month, he flew 20 combat missions in 6 days. On August 20th, Erich had another exceptionally lucky escape. Aircraft of the 3rd Gruppe were supporting Stuka ground attack aircraft commanded by the famous tank buster Hans-Ulrich Rudel, and Erich's force of 8 Bf-109s tangled with a much larger group of Soviet aircraft, possibly as many as 4 Lags and Yak-9 fighters, and another 40 Il-2 Sturmovaks. Erich shot down 2 aircraft and was then struck by either debris from the 2nd aircraft or ground fire, forcing him to crash land behind enemy lines. He was taken prisoner by Soviet soldiers, but feigned an internal injury so convincingly that it fooled a Russian doctor who had been brought to the scene. He was put on a stretcher and loaded onto a truck and driven away. When Stukas flew overhead, Erich seized his chance, rushing a distracted guard and jumping off of the truck into a sunflower field. The soldiers pursued him, shooting, and he hid out in a small village to await nightfall. Then he moved westwards, estimating where the German front line might be. He followed behind a Soviet infantry patrol, who looked as if they were similarly headed for the German lines. As he approached, he was mistaken for a Russian and shot by a German sentry. The bullet ripped a trouser leg, but he was otherwise unharmed. Although safe, he was not able to leave immediately. Russian patrols were still aggressively active in the area. He was given a rifle and stayed to assist the German infantry in driving off another patrol. He was then returned to his Staffel for a birthday party, a celebration given to a pilot who has escaped certain death. Erich's closest friend on his ground crew, Heinz Mertens, reportedly grabbed a rifle and set off to find Erich when he had heard he had been shot down. On September 2nd, in recognition of his clear combat skills and leadership abilities, Erich was appointed Staffelkapitän and put in charge of 9 Staffel JG-52, replacing Bertard Kortz. Kortz and his wingman had gone missing in action on August 29th, last seen in a dogfight with Soviet-era Cobra fighters.